All right, today I want to look at image calibration in PixInsight. This will be part 3. Just so you know, what we want to do is just talk about these different processes, and we're going to handle them in the order in which we would actually employ them in a real data set. But the objective right now is not to actually begin processing the data set. I just want you to see the effects of the way these things work. Processing an entire data set would take a lot of time and a lot of downtime. So watching the computer do its thing. So at the end of it, when we're talking about these things after calibration and registration and various things, we will then kind of attack an entire data set. But right now, I just want to show you the concepts of the way these things are done in PixInsight. Excuse me. Now, we're dealing here with again our raw data folder, our process data folder, which we've already talked about in our previous videos. I have added a flat field here that I will be using in our calibration routines. Remember, this flat field is one that I have had to synthesize myself because we didn't have real flat fields, or at least we couldn't find the flat fields. So we will talk about how to create an actual flat field, an actual master flat field at another point. In fact, the creation synthetically of a flat field, which I've done for this image, or these images that we'll talk about today, really goes beyond the scope of this. In fact, is very much an advanced technique. So just hold off that, but I'm going to use this flat field in a little bit, and we'll use it in our video demonstration here. First of all, we want to go ahead and get PixInsight started. Remember, just a single click on that PixInsight on the bar will start that thing bobbing up and down. We want to be patient, don't want to click it more than once. You just don't want 3 different versions of PixInsight running at the same time. It is very hardware intensive, and so you just don't need more running than needs to be. When it's fully open, the process console will close on its own. Again, I can drag and see it, but if I have my cursor off of it, then that's the case. Anytime you have new PixInsight versions that are available to be uploaded, you'll get notification of it right here. I just generally don't see a reason to upload new notifications right when they come out. So I'm still pretty much working in 1.8 right now, and so not that big of a deal to get the most updated version, at least not in my opinion. But anyway, now that it's open, let's go ahead and look and talk about a few various things. Last time we looked at a single version of the Lagoon Nebula data. Today I just want to talk about image calibration as a process. And you'll remember all of our processes can be found under the process menu. And I typically, again, go to all processes, and I just go down to where it is when I find it. You have to be, again, very careful with these menus. It's easy to get off the menu. It just takes a little bit of hand-eye coordination to navigate these menus this way. But our objective is to go ahead and click on image calibration as a process routine. And when I do that, it will bring up this dialog on the side. Now, obviously, different screens have different real estate. So on this computer, I have to pretty much demonstrate, put it off to the side a little bit the best you can. And in fact, because you'll notice that the screen goes all the way down beyond my toolbar down here, it can be hard on smaller displays to see everything. So that said, notice how in blue here everything is written, and if I click on it, I can expand and contract certain sections of it. And I'm going to do that, and just to show you that there are basically 8 different sections of this whole image calibration dialog, and I can open them and close them as I need them just by simple clicking on each of the sections. And I will generally, what you will see is that we don't need to worry about too many of them. Target frames would be adding the files that I want to apply the flat field or any kind of calibration file to, and so this is where we would select them. More on that later. Format hints, I have no clue. We are not going to even worry about it. I've never worried about that section, so you can pretty much leave it closed. Output files, this is an important section. We will want to determine when we apply the calibration, each of those files will be saved to an output directory. We've already created the directory, if you'll remember, and we'll point to that here in a little bit. But anyway, that's where we'll do that. Pedestal, again, don't worry about it. You will just use the default values on that. Same thing with overscan. We won't worry about overscan. And then it comes down to whether or not we're using any kind of bias frames, dark frames, or flat fields. And we'll talk about that here in a second. First of all, realize that if I go to dark frames, I can actually add the files that I want to calibrate. This is where we would generally speak, being the first thing we do with in an image is calibrate our files. Generally speaking, what we we will go to that raw data file, raw data folder to get those files. And in that case, again, I can make sure that you're on the desktop, and then from the desktop, you can you'll see those directories that we have created, those folders we have created. Go to the raw data, go to the 11th, go to Lagoon Nebula, and for the purpose of this one, I'm just going to select one file, and I'm just going to calibrate the one file, and I want to show the difference between the two. Now, I could calibrate them all at once if I wanted to, or just a few at a time, but generally speaking, I just want to do one of those files. So I'm going to select the very first one in the list, and I'm going to say open, and notice how it will populate anything you have as in this little list that you see here. So this just basically says I have one file that I want to calibrate, and that's it. And then once I've done with that, I can close it, and it's always still going to be there. So until I tell the whole routine to run, that is going to be right there. Go down to output files, and this is where we're going to set the directory for the new file to be copied. Now, what's important here is that I do pinpoint and select the actual directory that we have created, and I can do that by clicking on that little folder button right there. And that will actually bring up the desktop whereby we will see what we're looking for. And make sure you go to your desktop now, and it's usually the first move that you make because that's where our folders are stashed. Do not make an assumption here by just going, by clicking there and clicking the first thing you see. It generally speaking will not point automatically to where you want it to go. So make sure you go to the desktop and every time navigate exactly where you want it to be. You'll recall that under the process data folder we created in the previous video or previous videos, we have a couple of different things that we have seen here. Let me go ahead and I'm going to ignore that file there. I've been doing some experimenting on something else. But generally, when we see this, we go to Lagoon. And under calibrated files, you should have nothing right now. But this is where we are actually going to save. This is the directory we are going to choose to save. And to notice how it gives us the word choose down here that we can have. And notice now it actually gives the file path for our directory. So there's the folder, the Lagoon, the calibrated files folder. So what's going to happen is that this is going to affect the single target frame, which is here, and it's going to save a copy of it that's already calibrated into the calibrated files directory that we have. Now, notice one thing, two things of importance here. The rest of the information generally by default is what we're going to use. You won't have to do anything else. Notice, however, that it will save as an output extension of a FIT file, FIT, Remember, our original file is an NEF file. It's the raw Nikon format. So from this point on, what it's going to do is it's going to convert it to a FIT file. And we're fine with FITs. We want to work it in FITs, but they will become FIT files once we have worked on them. Most similarly here, notice how it gives you an _C for this postfix here. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to append a postscript to each of the files with an _C. Obviously, the letter C stands for calibrated. So what that will allow us to do is to be able to look at any file in that calibration folder, and it will have the _C indicator on it. And basically that's kind of nice because it will tell you at a glance that that file has been calibrated, and I can rely upon that fact. Sometimes we'll see these files maybe out of place, and just by looking at the _C on it, at least that's an indication to you that that this was a calibrated file, not just the raw file. 32 bit floating point is fine. Again, you're just going to use the default settings for this, and the only exception here is on error. If there is an error, you can tell it to continue or abort the process. Normally, I would definitely want it to abort. I just generally, you don't have to worry about errors very often, as long as you've got everything done right. But not a bad thing to allow it to go ahead and abort the process if it does detect an error. But generally speaking, it's not important. Go to the next thing down is pedestal. Again, you don't worry about that one. Overscan, don't worry about that one. That leads us to master bias, master dark, and master flat fields that I want to talk about at the same time. If I had a camera that required dark frames in order to shoot it. Now, such a camera would be something more like our astronomy cameras, our dedicated Astro CCDs that are cooled. We, generally speaking, would take dark frames with those cameras. And the reason we would, it's not because those cameras are bad, it's because those cameras actually have built-in temperature controllers, and we're able to lock in on specific temperatures. And that's important because it allows us to be able to model all the thermal noise in the camera very accurately. The problem with DSLRs is that they do not have onboard temperature controllers, and what will happen is that over the span of several images, it's hard to really predict and lock down what those temperatures are at any given time. So therefore, there is a real debate about whether dark frames are even useful to begin with. I am of the convention that of the opinion that they just aren't worth the effort. They aren't worth the time. There's too many ifs and too many. You just don't really know if they're useful or not. And so I just generally will not employ dark frames in DSLR images, and I don't think you should either. It just overly complicates the process and potentially ruins the image. It also requires you to actually take dark frames during the course of each individual evening, and usually those that do it will actually put dark frames in between all the light frames, and which can which not only heats up the camera, but also it just becomes something even more tedious to the process. So I would just shoot all my light frames that night and not worry about it. Bias frames usually occur when we want to scale darks. I can take bias images and I can use an existing set of dark frames to do what's called dark frame scaling. We're not going to worry about that at all with DSLRs. However, a set of bias frames may be helpful in some cases with DSLRs, but again, it's going to be something that we generally turn off. Last time we talked about the need for master flats, especially or a flat field, especially with bias frames, and excuse me, especially with the Rasa telescope images, because of the way that the light tends to fall off on the edges. That vignetting does allow does make the image a little bit hard to process, and because it imposes some artificial light in the images that we really don't want. So the purpose of flat fields, again, is to be able to model exactly what it is that we want to subtract from the image, flattening the field and allowing us only to see the good light that we want to see. Now, let me just, before we go to this step, I'm going to close the image calibration dialog, and let me open up a copy of that flat field that is on the desktop that we originally put. So I'm going to go to desktop, and I'm going to open up that flat field fit there. And I want you to see what this flat field just looks like before we use it in this process. So here it is. And remember that when it comes up, it is completely dark. So and flat fields are very much dark. And so what we have to do is go to screen transfer function to be able to see an indication of what this would look like by using the auto stretch dialog. So I'm going to click auto stretch here, and I'm going to show you what a flat field averaged out should look like. Again, I synthesized this. I made it look, I just made this file artificially, but let me blow it up so you can see. And basically, if I were to consider those original images, basically what a flat field does is it models the actual vignetting and the hotspot center of the telescope. It stands to reason that everything being digital, if I were to use this in a flat field, then what this will do is actually subtract to the image each of those images in order to flatten the field, and that's kind of the idea here. Now, technically, it's not a subtraction; it's a division. We'll talk about that here in a bit, but even so, you can probably see how this would help to. This model of the image would help us to be able to flatten the field. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, but I just wanted to show you a picture of what that flat field looks like, so that when we go through the process of doing this, it will make a little bit more sense to you. I'm going to go back to image calibration again. The nice thing about it is if I go back to target frames, notice how nothing's changed. Everything is exactly the way we left it. So that's kind of a nice thing. It will remember the previous setting. Master flat, now this does mean, however, that I'm going to have to pinpoint, if I'm going to employ a master flat, I have to actually show where that image is. So I'm going to click the little folder there, and I'm going to go to my desktop, because that's where I kept it, and I'm going to select that actual flat field, and I'm going to say open. Now, notice how it is pointed there to the from the desktop flat field fit, and the only last thing I need to do really is to say calibrate. I have to calibrate this, and that tells the computer that I'm actually going to use the file that I've pointed to, and I'm going to calibrate the image with that file. Now, the next step will be to see that little circle there. It says Apply Global. This is the button that I'm going to click in order to start the process. Once I am convinced that everything is ready to rock and roll, I'm going to click it, and then, of course, the process console comes up. Now, remember, I'm calibrating one target frame only, and it is going to give me the process of that as it goes. So at first, with these raw files, it has to decode them. It has to recognize the type of file that it is, and it will begin the process. Notice how the process, my icon will spin for a while as it's doing it, and so I just have to be patient. With a stack of 30 images or so, you can run all 30 images with you do is let it run for an hour and then come back. In the case of one image, usually it will get done pretty quickly, and I can just kind of talk through it as it is going on. Now, This is pretty intensive though, so it does take a little bit of time to do these processes. So we'll just wait until we'll just wait until it completes. This computer, incidentally, it does not have a whole lot of RAM to it. So I've found with this computer, I can't process more than two flat fields at a time. That's because there's just not enough memory in the computer, and the more memory you have, the more that you can do. This has a minimal amount of memory in it. Notice how once the process was complete, it completely shut down the process console. If I want to see what happened there, I can just mouse over the console again to see what actually happened. It does do, it runs through these categories of estimating the noise in the image. It will actually write the fits. What that means is that it actually applies the calibration. One succeeded. I only had one image to calibrate, and it tells me that it took 91 seconds to do that. Kind of nice. It allows me to estimate or tell how long each of those things happen. I'm going to go ahead and close the image calibration dialog, and for right now I'm going to go ahead and go back to the desktop. I'm not going to close PixInsight, but I do want to show you how I can go to the desktop from here, and that is if I click on that little negative sign, the yellow negative right there, notice how what it will do is actually minimize PixInsight down to the lower right hand corner. Now I still see the screen transfer function, so it's there are aspects of it that's still open, but basically it allows me to get to the background if I want. Notice that if I click on that PixInsight icon down there, I can get right back where I was. So just know that I can kind of collapse it down at any time and get to the desktop if I want to just by doing that little move. Now, remember what we have here. We had raw data, we had processed data. Notice when I go now into the processed data folder, I go processed data Lagoon. Let's go ahead and go to the drop-down list so you can kind of see this. And if I go to calibrated files now, notice how that I now have a file that has been saved under the calibrated files. And remember how I indicated to you that it should save as _C? This tells me that this file has indeed been calibrated, and I can trust that _C as being an indication of that. So that file is now there. Now, let's real quickly, let's open this file. And I am going to, and in fact, I'm go ahead and double click on it here from inside there. It's going to open up another instance of PixInsight to do this. And I'm going to go ahead and, since I have my auto stretch dialog, I'm just going to click it. Now, give it a second to come up. And I want you to notice here, if you will remember the original image, what it looked like compared to the other. If I drag this, I can make the window any size that I kind of want. Remember that here is the new image. And in versus the other one, let's go ahead and open side by side the raw file of the same image, just so you can kind of see what the raw looks like. And I'm going to come back into the raw Lagoon, and I'm just going to open this other one up, because I want you to see what the flat field actually does to the raw file and how it works to flatten out our image. Takes a second to open, as raw files generally take more time because it has to decode. So as it's doing that, let's see it brought up. I would sing for you, but I'm a little under the weather. So here we go. Let's go ahead, and now that it is in blue, that means that the screen transfer will affect that image. So I'm going to press screen. I'm going to press it, and I'm going to then kind of resize my window to make it look like the other one. Notice how that I can match zoom effect. This up here is 1/10 or 1 to 10. Here, if I continue just to click it a few more times, I'll see it's 1 to 10. So I can kind of match what these files look like. And again, I've only applied the screen stretch to these. But what that does is allows you to look at these images side by side. And incidentally, if I want to see them, I have a couple of options here. I can automatically do this little windows side by side by telling it to cascade or tile the windows. By pressing tile, it will actually put them automatically side by side, is exactly the same size. So that's kind of just an interesting thing. Sometimes if I want to cascade the windows, I can put one over the other, and you will see these files put cascading one over the other. I can cascade and fit the windows in the image at the same time. Usually that's pretty helpful. Again, I just want to tile them. I'll normally just put them side by side just by myself. But notice the difference between these two files. Remember, on the left-hand side is the raw image. On the right-hand side is the calibrated with a flat field image. And notice how uniform now the right image is. The corners are no longer dark. I have, and in fact, there is more detail in the center sections of this nebula because I've managed to equalize and flatten out all of this artificially brightened area. I've kind of managed to already just by employing a flat field, I now have an image that's more ready to work with. Now, this doesn't mean that if I zoom in on this, it doesn't mean that the image is cleaner. I can still zoom this image in. I can still look and see the salt and pepper of the image. I mean, all the little noise artifacts of the image are definitely still there. However, it does definitely demonstrate that I've got a better starting point for my processing. And in this being only one file, understand what would happen if I have calibrated all 30 files before I average them. Then I don't have to worry about this hotspot vignetting artifact or the effect that you see on this telescope. Again, the RASA is a really fast, nice telescope, but if it does have an issue, it's going to be the fact that it isn't going to produce the flattest of images. I'm going to need to flat field these right when I shoot them, and so and that leads to some issues with being able to process. We'll talk about more about flat fielding as we actually use the RASA telescope, and in fact any telescope. However, in many cases, because this vignetting is somewhat predictable, in a few cases we can either artificially create these flat fields, which takes a little bit of work, or we can even employ flat fields from different images without too big of an issue. There are a lot of rules when it comes to flat fields. We'll get into those rules later. But for right now, for the purpose of this, for this routine, for this video, I want to show you what happens when we appropriately flat field an image. And it should be a significant improvement. If when you test a flat field, as we have just done, if you do not see a significant improvement in the image, then more than likely we're going to have to find another way around that. Do not make the assumption that any flat field is a good flat field. That would be a dangerous mistake and it could lead to some real issues. But the eye test should show you here that I'm going to be much better off working the image on the right in continued processing than I would if I worked the image on the left. And so the flat field definitely, even though I created it artificially, it definitely serves its purpose in this image and allows us to go forward with it. Anyway, let me go ahead and close these up, and let me just remind one or two things that we will want to look at going forward is in a full data set. Again, I would probably choose to calibrate an entire set of target frames. I can clear any dialog, and I would probably go to add all of the files in the raw data set next time. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm not going to do it now, but if I were to do that, I would open up everything and I would see everything here. And notice how there are definitely 30 frames in the image. That's kind of the nice thing about seeing them is all when it proliferates or populates here under this dialog, it does count the frames for me. And in fact, I can actually determine which ones. Well, actually, I can't do that. Actually, I can. Notice how if I say toggle selected, I can determine out of the list to only choose a few of them if I want. So there are a few things you can do once they're in the list. Just once they're in the list, it doesn't mean I have to use them. I can use only one selected. But anyway, we'll worry about doing multiple calibrations when we get to a full data set later. But anyway, that's image calibration. We will come back in video 4 and we're going to talk about, at that time, we will talk about aligning images. Where we're going to go to star alignment. We're going to talk about how to get these images now registered appropriately. And so our registration routines will be done with star alignment. And you'll see how that works in the next set of videos. More on that later. Bye.